So I got a request, two requests actually, on how do we get a Chrome extension to interact with a local database. And so in this video, I'm just going to be showing you how to use a Chrome extension and how to get it to interact with what's called IndexedDB, which is a database API that comes with JavaScript that saves stuff on the hard drive. And so I'm just going to create this little extension here where on the left, we can do all of the CRUD operations you can do with any database, the create, read, update, delete. On the left, we can create records. On the right, we can read, update, and delete records. So let's create a record here. So we're going to say extension, we're going to say the date of birth, and the unique key, or the way we identify each record, is by the email, so we can't have duplicate emails. So just add this guy. There we go. Let's search the guy we just added, which is jack@frost.com. And there we go. That's the get operation. Let's edit that record. We'll change the name to, I don't know, just say index. We'll save the changes. We've just updated. Let's delete that record. Actually, let's search for a new record first. Let's go @lll.org, which is some guy I entered in before. That's S, that's his whatever. Let's delete this record here. Let's go back to the jack@frost.org. I think it was com. There we go, with the same change name. Let's look at the record we just deleted. So @lll.org. And of course we search and we don't get it. So that's all we're going to do. We're just going to take a look at how to make a Chrome extension work with the IndexedDB. And so to those two guys who requested this, forgive me, I forgot your names. I hope this answers your question. Let's begin. So I have a basic boilerplate Chrome extension up and running. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll have a link in the description below or a card on the top right. I won't be going over all of the minute details of a Chrome extension. Again, I did a video on that. Link in the description below or a card on the top right. So let's just start with the manifest file here. The name will just say, I don't know, Chrome extension with local DB. Description will say Chrome extension interacting with IndexedDB. Version 1, manifest 2. We have the icons we're going to use here. We have the background script. We have the options page, which we're not going to use, but I'll keep it there anyways. We're going to use the popup-HTML and the popup-script.js. And so in a Chrome extension, we have the idea of a back end and front end. The back end is going to be the background.js. The front end is going to be the popup-HTML, as well as this file here, the script, which actually animates all of this stuff. So we're going to keep that there. The permissions, we're not going to be injecting any of the foreground scripts. This guy right here. We're not going to be injecting that guy into any of the pages we're on, so we don't need any of these permissions. So we can delete all that. And that should be good for our manifest JSON. Let's move on to the popup-HTML. So I'm not going to go over this too in depth. I'm assuming if you're watching this video of this level, you know how to use a basic HTML. All this popup-HTML does is produce this page right here. And so we have two forms, one on the left, one on the right. We use the one on the left to add records. On the right, we use the form to search, and it populates with information, and then we can edit. The reason it looks like this is because all the HTML elements are just on screen without any of the JavaScript to animate or show or hide stuff. This is what it looks like to the user. Once we use the popup-script.js, it looks like this. So this is what it looks like with the popup-script.js activated. So let me just go back here. So it's the basic HTML page with some CSS. We have the two forms. This is the left side form. This is the right side form here, and we've attached the popup-script.js. So let me just close these two guys. We're done with the manifest. We're done with the popup-HTML. The two main scripts we're going to be using, let me open that again, is the background.js for the back end and the popup-script.js for the front end. So let me just do a split screen thing happening here. Let me close this. Let's do split screen. I want background on this side, and I want pop-up script on the other side. Can I do that? There we go. So let me close this. So let's begin by creating the database. All of the interacting with the database is going to happen on the back end in this script here, not the front end. The front end is just going to call or message the back end to do stuff to the database, and then the back end is going to message the front end saying, "Hey, I did that stuff to the database." So I just have these two listeners. This is how the Chrome extensions, the back end and the front end interact or communicate. I have a roster, just some data to enter into the database. So let's go ahead and create the database. Let's do a function for that. So let's say let db equals null. This is where we're going to save a reference to the database. Let's create two functions right now. Create database. So create I'd say database, and we'll use a function or create a function to destroy the database. So function, let's say delete and destroy and delete database. So let's start with the creating a database. So we're just going to make a request, and we're going to use an API that comes with JavaScript. So let's just say const request is equal to window.indexedDB.open, and the name of the database is going to be my testDB. Now we can add a version number of the database in here. We're not going to, but I'll tell you what it means in a second. So we have the request. And so as soon as we have this request, there's going to be three properties we're concerned with. Request.onError. It's going to be a function, so equals function. We get an event. And we just copy this. We have request.onUpgradeNeeded. Upgrade needed, perfect. And then we have onSuccess. So onError is pretty self-explanatory. If something goes wrong with the request, we're just going to say console.log problem opening. How do you spell it? Opening, yeah, DB. And so on upgrade needed and on success. So whenever we open a new database, the on upgrade needed gets called. It executes. If we open a database that we've already created, this guy doesn't get called, and we just skip to on success. And so if we also open the same database with a different version number, a higher version number, this on upgraded guy gets called or executed. So if we open a new database, or we increase the version of the database, on upgraded gets called, and then on success gets called. If we're opening an old database, so it's not new and it's not upgraded, just on success gets called. So no matter what, on success tells you there's a database opened. So when on upgraded, this is where you define the schema or how your database is laid out, your tables. Now, IndexedDB doesn't use tables, rows and columns. It uses objects, but for the sake of being relatable, I'm gonna refer to these object stores, what they call them, as tables. So this is where you define the schema, all the tables and columns and rows of your database. So let's go ahead and define one of those. So we're just going to say db is equal to event.target.result, and we're going to create a new object store or a table. So we're going to say we'll just say object store equal db.create object store, and the name of the table or the store we'll just call roster, and then we can pump in a few options. We're just concerned with one option. That option is the key path. The key path is how we're going to be keeping track of each record. So we're going to be able to search the database by email, and we can have similar emails. So that's going to be the unique key. Like in any database, how you look up any sort of record, you use that key. We're going to use the email as the key. So the key path is going to be equal to the email. Now we could create a new or another index, another way to look up the table. We can go by name, but just to keep this video simple, we'll just use the key path email. So once we've created an object store, we need to execute that or listen for it when that transaction occurs. So we're just going to say object store. I'll put it down here. .transaction, and it's .onComplete, and it's a callback function with an event. And we're just going to say console.log database created. Actually, no, we'll just say object store created. Again, the object store is just like a table, so object store created. Here we go. And again, no matter what happens, on success gets called. So once we've created the schema for the database, how it's being laid out, then we're going to have this guy get called. So we're just going to do another db equals event.target. And we need to do this because if we open an old database, this guy doesn't get run, and then we don't save our database here. So we need to save this database no matter what. So we have db.onError if there's an error, so function event, like that. And so we'll say console.log failed to open db. And if this guy doesn't get run, of course we know that the database opened. So we'll just say console.log db opened. There we go. So that's the basic gist of how we open and create a database. We request from the window.index.open. We have the name of the database. We can provide an upgrade number if we don't. it's a new database or an old database. If it's a new database or an upgraded database, this guy runs. This guy creates the schema. This is the only place you can define what the database looks like. You can't do it in here. So on upgrade runs, and no matter what happens, on success tells us that the database opened successfully. So let's fill out the delete database. It's much the same. So we're just going to do const request equals, and instead of window indexedb.open, it's window.indexedb.delete database, and my test DB. Same thing, we just copy it. There's an on error and on success. Let me just copy all this. Let's paste that here. We don't need on upgrade needed. So delete this. And we'll say console.log problem deleting DB. And on success, we don't need this part here. We'll just do DB deleted and failed to, oops, let's go back. There we go. Failed to deleted. There we go. Failed to delete DB. So that's the create and delete guy. So once we've successfully opened the database, we want to populate it with this information right here. So on success, we know we opened it. We'll do it right here. So we'll put it in the functions just to keep it organized. We'll say insert records, insert. Nope. Let's do insert records, and we'll need the data. The data is called the roster. Let's define that function down here. So insert records, and we'll just say records. All right. So how do we add data to the database? Well, we have the records thing. This should be a function. Now, to do any sort of the CRUD operations, the create, read, update, and delete with a index.db, we have to do what's known as transactions. So let's just check that we have a database first. It's just a bit of checking. We don't really need it for this extension, but if you're going to code this in real life, you want to check so that if anybody called this insert records, you want to check that there's an actual database and not a null up here. So we're just going to say if there's a database, we need to get a transaction from that database. So we're just going to say const insert transaction. Transaction is equal to db.transaction. Now there's two arguments to this. There's the tables or the object stores you want to perform transactions on. So we want the roster and what you want to do to them. We want to read, write. I think there's read, write, and read only. I don't think there's just a write. There's read, write. So we have the insert transaction, and then we need to create an object store variable. It's going to look a bit confusing. I'll tell you what this means in a second. So object store is equal to insert transaction dot, and we're going to say object store, and we're going to say roster again. Now, why do we say roster twice? Well, when you do this transaction, this says what tables, plural, do you want this transaction to be affiliated with? So we can easily, what it normally takes is this, an array of tables. We have one table, but let's just say we had roster, we had, I don't know, let's just say clients, and then we had, I don't know, locations. So we had 3 different tables or object stores, and then we create an object store telling it which one we want to actually do the read write on. So that's why it looks kind of weird. So we have to specify roster just in case we have multiple tables here. Since we only have one table, we don't need this. So we're just going to delete all this stuff here. So we create a transaction on roster, read write, and then we create an object store from that. And to add things to your database, we just say object store.add, and we're going to add some data. Now, since index.b doesn't use rows and columns, it saves things in objects. We want to add all of these objects here, like that. So we could do something like this. We can add an object where you go blah, 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 blah. But since we're adding more than one object, we're just going to loop through this roster and then use the add function. So let's delete this. I'm going to say, is it data or is it roster? It's roster. So we're just going to say roster dot for each, and we're just going to say each one is like a person. So we'll just say person, and there we go. And we're just going to say object store dot add, and we're going to add the person. Now this returns a request, much like this guy returns a request like this right here. And of course the request has an on error on success thing. So we're just going to say let request equal that, and we're going to say request dot on success equals function. We don't really need the event, so we'll just do this. I'm just going to say console.log added, and we're just going to add this. We're just going to say spit out to the console, who did you add? We added the person. Now, not only does this request have an onSuccess, but this entire transaction, because we have multiple transactions going on right now. Once all of the transactions are complete, we can say something like this: insert transaction dot onSuccess is equal to function. We don't really need the event, and it's actually not onSuccess, it's onComplete. So onComplete, there we go. Let me copy this, paste it here, and of course we have onError. So onError, and here I'm just going to say console.log, and we're going to change this console.log a bit later, but for now we're just going to say all insert transactions complete. There we go. And here I'm just going to say console.log problem inserting records, period. Should have period there. So that's the basic format of any sort of transaction, any sort of create, read, update, delete function for the IndexedDB database. You create a transaction, you list all of the tables you want to affect with this transaction, you create an object store which specifies which table at the time you want to interact with, and then for the insert we use the add right here, and then we have an onSuccess, and for the complete transaction we have onComplete and onError. So let's go ahead and do the other CRUD commands. So we have the create, let's do a read or a get, and then we're going to do an update and delete. Let's do function, insert record, let's do get record. And it's plural. And we're just going to be using by the email. That's the index right here, the key path right here. We'll be searching by email. So I'm just going to name this guy email. And it's much the same format. We're going to say if, in fact, if it's the same format, why don't I just copy paste, right? So if DB, if there's an actual database, then we're not doing an insert transaction, we'll do a get transaction. And we're doing a roster, we don't need to write, we just need to read. So we just do read only. We have an object store from the roster, perfect. This guy should be a get transaction. This guy should also be a get transaction. And this guy should also be get transaction right up here. Get transaction, roster, and console. I don't know, let's just say, yeah, all transactions complete. All get transactions complete. Problem inserting, problem getting. There we go. Records, record, roster. We don't need a for each loop. So delete this. Request is equal to object.store.get. There we go. Get person. No, get by email. And so this request onSuccess will need the event. The event is the result. So that holds the record we actually got. So let's just do this. Let's go, again, we're going to modify this code, these console.logs, a little later on, but just for now, we're just going to say event.target.result. That's the guy we got. And that looks good. If DB, transaction, get transaction, request, get email, request onSuccess. Let's move on to the update function. So function, update, record, and we're going to be updating by incomplete record. So it's going to be an object. So we'll just say record. There we go. And again, the same format. So if there's a database, we're doing a transaction. You scroll up a bit. There you go. It's not a get, it is we'll say put. Yeah, we'll do a put. This guy should be a put as well. And read only, no, we need read, write. Object store, this guy should be put as well. All get transactions, no. All put transactions complete. This guy should be a put as well. Problem getting, problem, let's say upgrading, updating records. Request, and we need a put. So put that record. And once we put the record, we're not really going to be returning something onSuccess. We're going to be returning something here. You'll see later on in the video. So we don't need this request.onSuccess stuff. So we can delete that. Let's move on to the delete record. So function, delete record. And we're going to be deleting by the email as well. And we'll copy and paste. I need to close that. What's going on here? Don't need that. Copy this. If there's a database, we're going to be doing a delete transaction. DLETE. And so this guy should be delete delete. This guy should also be delete. Should all delete transactions complete. This guy should be a, sorry, that's delete again. Let's delete. And problem deleting records. And request, this should be delete. And again, we don't really need to return anything right here with the request.onSuccess. So we're just going to say delete record. In that case, we just don't even need to do it in a separate variable like this. We can just say object store.put and object store.delete. Does that look good? Delete transaction, all delete transactions complete. All right, it's good. And that shouldn't be record, that should be email. All right, before we even move any further, let's just verify that we didn't break the program. Let's go to the extension. Let me close that. We'll go to Chrome //extensions. We'll refresh and no errors, perfect. Let's add some data. Let's do this. So once we create or start this background script, we want to execute this create database function, and we have on success, where is it? We're going to execute insert records, and that should insert all of these records, and that should print out what we've inserted right here. Where is it? On success, on upgrade needed, right here, insert records, added, whatever. So we should see this in the console. So let's call this function here, create database, and we'll save. We'll go back. Let's get the background page going so we can see what's going here. Let's refresh, and we get, all right, object store created, database opened, added all these records, all insert transactions complete. So all these, well, I wouldn't say all, but the insert function is working. And since all these functions here use the exact same logic, we can assume, we'll see in a second if they break or if they work as well. So now that we have that out of the way, let's handle the communication back end to front end, but we'll stay on the back end. All right, so on the front end, they're going to call us on the back end saying, hey, I want you to insert this record or delete this record or get this record or update this record. We handle all of those listenings, those messages here. So we're going to have an if tree like this. We're going to say if request.message is equal to, and we'll just say equal to insert, then we'll run the insert function. Else if the request.message is equal to, and this will say get, and we'll copy this line, paste. What don't we need here? This guy, and this guy. Else if get, else if update, else if delete. Let's go here, space here, and this one's missing one. There we go. So this is how we're going to handle all of the calls from the pop-up script on this end right here. So what are we going to do? Well, when they call for insert, we're just going to say insert records, that exact same function here, which I can now cross out because we don't want to keep inserting the same records. We're going to get an error. So now that we inserted it once, we don't need to call it back on the on success. So we say insert records, and we're going to give them the records. So it's going to be request, and we'll call that on the front end. We'll just call it the payload. And once we get the payload, we're just going to send a message back to the front end saying, hey, all of those records you gave me to insert into the database, that's been done. So we're just going to say chrome.runtime.send message, and we're going to say message is equal to, I don't know, we'll just say successfully, SUCCESS, successfully inserted record, like that. And then we're going to have another property, another key or property that's the payload, and that we're just going to say is the, now this is, remember when I said we're going to modify all of those console.logs? We're about to modify them now. So I'm just going to say res right now, and you'll see what res means in a second. So these calls right here, object.store, where are they? Object store.add, .get, .update, .delete, those are asynchronous. So if we write the code like this, when we insert the records, this guy's going to run right away. We don't know if it's successful because we haven't waited for this guy to complete. So we need to create a promise, wrap these guys in promises, and then do the proper, once the promise is fulfilled, then we'll send the message to the front end. So let me just complete this right here. So we're just going to say let request equal the promise, and then we're just going to say request then res. That's just the response from the promise. And then we're going to send the message back to the front end saying, hey, your promise has been fulfilled. So let me just do this. So how do we get the this thing to be a promise? Let's convert these guys into promises. So all we need to do is return new promise. And the promise gets 2 objects. We're just going to use 1, but I like to just do it like this. Or a resolved and reject object like this. Let's put all of this in the promise. And do some proper formatting. All right, so instead of console logging, we can still console log that, but we need to return what we're going to do is return a true or a false value, depending on what went wrong or right. So if all the transactions are complete, we're just going to, not return, excuse me, we're going to resolve a true. If everything went wrong, we're going to resolve a false. And this is going to get picked up on the front end, and based on true or false, we're going to do stuff on the front end. So resolve, 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 perfect. Returning that promise, resolve true, resolve. We can keep this added stuff. So let's do that for the rest of these guys. Now the get's a bit different. So we're just going to say return new promise. And again, we get the resolve object and the reject object. And copy this. Instead of true or false, we're actually getting data. So we're going to do this. We can still have those console logs, but instead of console logging the result, we're just going to resolve the event.target.result. So we're sending back through the promise the actual data we got from the database. So let's do that for the last 2 guys here. All right, we'll do right here, return new promise. We get the resolve. Again, you don't need both of them. You could just simply say resolve like this. But I like just to do resolve reject just to be complete, and it just forces me to keep up with what a promise is. Reject. We need this. Copy all that. Put that in here. Do some formatting. And all transactions complete. We'll do resolve of true here and resolve of false here. False. And lastly, this guy right here. So return new promise, resolve, reject. So you do a semicolon here. You don't need the semicolons, but let's just be consistent. Take all this. Let's do some proper formatting. And again, resolve true and resolve false. Resolve CWI false. All right, so now that these guys are set up with promises, we can go and complete this chain right up here. So when they request an insert, we have an insert records. We give the payload, which is going to be the record they want to insert. We have the promise that gets returned. We wait for it to resolve. Once it gets resolved, we send a message back up to the front end saying successfully inserted records, and the payload is that true or false. And based on that, true or false, we're going to do some stuff on the front end. So just copy this and paste it in all these guys. Paste, paste, and paste. Formats, delete these spaces, and then modify the function calls. All right, so this is a get, and that would be get record. And that's the payload, successfully successfully retrieved. IE, or is it EI? EIV, no, it's IE. Retrieved record. Payload is going to be the actual record for this guy. And this guy's going to be the update record. Payload, successfully updated record. The payload is going to be a true or false for that guy. And then this guy should be delete, not database. Delete record. The payload is going to be the email. Successfully deleted. So now that we have the back end all done, let's move on to the front end. And I've just looked over my notes, and these messages have to change because these messages are going to be how the front end knows what we're doing on the back end. So these messages are a bit too complicated. So we're just going to simplify them by doing this. We'll do insert, SUCCESS. You could absolutely do what we had. It's just we want to be consistent here. We want to be as concise and simple as is possible. So we're just going to do a get success like that. And we'll do a, what's this one? This guy's an update success. And I'm going to be copy and pasting some code, and I'll explain why I'm doing that, not writing it out perfectly for you guys. Just going to delete this, and this will be delete success. All right, so we're going to do the same thing on the front end, this if, else, if conditional tree. That's what I'm going to be copy and pasting. So give me 1 second. All right, so I copied and pasted a bunch of code I wrote. Why did I do that? Can I do this? We need more space. All right, why did I do this? All of this code here has nothing to do with a local database. All of this is just simple JavaScript that manipulates the HTML so that when we, say, inserted a value correctly, then we're going to loop through add rec input. That would be which guy? Pop-up HTML rec input, add rec input. All right, I see. So when we inserted a value correctly, we just cleared out all of the information in the input fields. When we get a proper record, then we're going to show it on the page. Again, none of this has to do with a local database. It just has to do with the user experience, showing the information on screen, hiding certain buttons, showing certain buttons. That's why I'm not going to go over every single little line here. Just understand that none of this has to do with the database. So when we do an update success, we show the user that we changed the changes have been saved. We enable buttons. We change the value of the text in buttons. We show buttons, things like that. So that's the whole tree for the little app or the little Chrome extension we have going here. So the actual part on the front end that has to do with the database or calling certain functions from the database are the add a record, search for a record, edit and save a record, and then finally delete a record. So let's start with the add a record. What are we going to do? Well, we're just going to send a message to the back end with the message being, what's the message? Insert. So let's do it here. So first things first, we need to prevent the default behavior of a form because this is hijacking a form. There we go. So it won't refresh the page. And then we need to get all of the form data. So form data is equal to new form data. And it's document.getElementById. What is the ID of this guy? I need this guy right here, HTML. Let's close this, put this guy here. What is the ID for this form? Add form. Add underscore form. Let's go back to this. There we go. So we have the form data. Now we need to send the message to the backend. So chrome.runtime.sendMessage, capital M. Two things, the actual message, and we're looking for an insert, and the payload. So payload is equal to, and the payload is going to be the object or the array of objects. And so the guy we're going to be adding is this. The name is going to be equal to the form data.get me the key or the value associated with the key name. Let's copy, paste, paste. The date of birth, the value associated with the DOB, and then finally the email. There we go. And that should be it. So we prevent the default behavior of the form, we capture the form data, and then we send the message to the back end. The message is insert with the payload, which is the data. That goes to the back end. The back end sees that the request message is insert. It then calls the insert records with that payload. Once that payload is processed, then we send a message back to insert success. A message back to the front end with insert success. The front end captures that message and it just clears out the values in that input field. So let's complete the get and stop that. The get and the search, edit, save, and delete. So again, let's prevent the default behavior. So event.prevent default. There we go. We need to capture the search term they're using. So search underscore term is equal to, and where is the term in the search form? It would be input text ID search term, that guy right there. So it's going to be equal to document.getElementById. The ID is search underscore term, and we want the value. So we have the actual search term, and then we just send a message to the backend, runtime.sendMessage, and two things. We have the message and the payload. So the message is going to be, it's expecting a get, right? Expecting a get, perfect. Get. And the payload is, of course, the actual search term. And that's done. Let's go on to the edit and save. So event.prevent default. This would be the edit record. When they click the save, that's when we want to update. So right here, disable save button. All right. So much like the insert, we're just going to send the backend a message. We're going to send them, it's not going to be an array. They're not going to expect an array of objects, just a simple object. So send message, and we don't really need to capture form data here. We're just going to say message, and what's it expecting an update, and the payload is going to be the actual object we're using to replace it with. So we're just going to copy this right here. Where's the name stuff? Copy this, and we didn't make a form capture, so we're just going to do this. And all that data, the new update data, is going to be in these guys right here. So update name, update DOB, and then the old name. We can't replace that name because that's how, we can't replace the email because that's how we're referencing or getting the record. So you can't update or replace the key. So we need to keep the same old email and just update with the name and DOB values. So it's in document.get element by ID. And that ID is update name, and we want the value. Same thing for the DOB. Yank that, paste that. We don't want the update name, we want the update DOB, and we just want the old value of the email, which is document.get element by ID, and that one should be on the span here. Where's the email? This guy right here, details email. So we'll say, oh, let's go back down. Where are we? Right here. Details email, and that would just be the inner text of the span, not the value. So we have the message, update, we send the payload, semicolon here. We're good. Let's move on to the delete record. So again, event.prevent default, and we're just going to send the message, delete. So chrome.runtime.send message, and the message is going to be equal to delete, right? That's what it's searching for, looking for, delete, perfect. And the payload is just going to be the email of the current record we're showing them. So payload, the current email is this guy right here. So just paste that, semicolon, and that looks good. Let me just review all this. So add record, prevent, get the form data, actual data, name, DOB, email, perfect. Search for record, search term, get, perfect. And edit, once they edit, we switch to the text boxes so they can edit. And then once they hit save, we send a message on update. Name is the update, DOB is the update, email is the old, email inner text, perfect. Event default, Chrome, send message, delete, and the payload is just the email or the key path you want to delete. So let's save that. Let's close this. Let's refresh the extension and see if it works. So refresh. All right. On success, or DB opened, perfect. Let's open up the actual guy here. Actually, we don't need to transform here. All right, let's do a inspect here. So this is the console from the front end. All right, so let's do this. Let's search by email. What data do we have here? We had this email here. Let's search by this guy. So control copy, control paste. We should have that record. Some errors. What's the error? Get record, request payload, request before initialization. And that is background 12. Background, let request equal, are we doing multiple requests? Oh, yes, we are. This request is already this request here, so we're redefining it. Let's specify this. So let's say this is the insert request. So this guy should be insert request. This guy is the get request. So this guy should be the get request. And this guy should be the update request. This guy should be update as well. Same with this guy, delete. And delete. All right, save, go back. Let's clear all the errors. Close this. Clear all, go back, refresh the extension. DB opened, perfect. Let's go here, and that's the email address. Let's search. There we go. So we have the S221180. Let's edit the record. Let's go Satchmo. Satchmo, save changes, changes saved, Satchmo, we get that. Let's request a different email. Let's do this guy right here, Spiral Fern. An S there. So S, paste, search, Spiral Fern. Let's delete this record. There we go. Let's search for that other guy, the yeah guy. Was it yeah? Yeah at lll.org. Yeah at lll.org. This guy should be Satchmo, not the S. Perfect. It updated. It kept the update. Let's search for that guy we deleted. Search. Nothing there. Doesn't show. And again, you can modify this to work. Like if there's no search, if there's no record, you can put a message here. I just didn't do it for this guy. So we deleted that record. Let's add a record. Let's just say extension 020284. 84. Email. Let's go jack@frost.com. Let's add that guy. Did it add? I don't know. Let's see this. No record found. That wasn't that guy. We can add. Let's see if it added. So let's search for that guy. Let's go jackfrost.com. We search. And it's not adding. Why isn't it adding? Insert record. Let's do this. And that's why we're doing it. We did the roster because we baked in that first initial array. And we should have just called it like when we called it here, the roster. That's not roster. That has to be the actual information that comes in. So that needs to be records. Records. Save. Let's go back. Refresh the extension. Let's try again. So extension, whatever the date, and Jack Frost. And if we successfully insert, all this information should go away. Mad. There we go. So let's search that guy. jack@frost.com. Search. There we go. So we got the adding correct. We got the updating correct. We got the reading correct. It gets the record, and we got the delete record request, or excuse me, the delete record correct. And so that's going to be it for this this video. It's a bit long, but now you know how to use a local database, specifically the IndexedDB, which comes with JavaScript, with a Chrome extension. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I will see you guys in the next one.